Oh, hey, wow, it's daylight outside. Well, I'm not exactly sure how to start. I'm trying to find something clever to say, but not because there's nothing clever to say, but because there seems to be too many options. Uh, Post-apocalyptic and cyberpunk stories actually have a common root, or if it's not a common root, then at least they have a kind of wishy-washy cousin that is neither one or the other, but is at the same time both, and also kind of its own thing. And that genre has been experiencing a bit of a revival lately, probably because it was in a. I'm not sure if it was in a lot of young adult fiction or if it was just in a couple of books that got pretty popular and got some movies and stuff like that. But there was a trend for it. And now I'm yawning again. Why only when I make videos? I'll try to keep it to a minimum while the vines come to strangle me. Um, the genre is sometimes it's called dystopian fiction, sometimes it's just called dystopia. I don't know. I still think that the name misses something, but at least it's a name that has a meaning, very direct meaning. Just as a utopia literally means a good place, a dystopia literally means a bad place, and that is in fact a very good way to sum up the genre. Usually, dystopias are science fiction, but they can be other genres. There have been a few attempts at dystopian fantasy, some of which have actually turned out pretty well. Um, but usually it's science fiction, probably because dystopia is very often a reflection of our own society. Take some of the problems du jour, problems of the day, and magnify them, turning them into basically the foundation of an entire world. It's it's oddly enough very rare for dystopian fiction to take place in a part of the world that is uniquely dystopian without the rest of the world being it. That was just something that just dawned on me. But yeah, a dystopia is a place where things are not going that well. And that can mean a lot of stuff. That can mean poverty, that can mean war, that can mean everything just smells really bad of kombucha. That was a reference to something. Um, but typically, dystopian fiction is about some kind of social oppression, usually, but not always, by a new kind of government or the old government that has just run amok, gone down the wrong path and gotten too powerful that way, and then just gone farther and farther down that path. A lot of dystopia plays on the idea of individuals being made powerless, not just being powerless. That can be anything. That can be facing a harsh climate. That can be just having to survive in a modern day world. But being made powerless by someone else. There is, to be very black and white, there is usually a powerful cast of society, a powerful, I wouldn't say breed because it's not necessarily genetic, but a powerful layer of society, powerful segment of society, usually a small, powerful elite in some way, and they are very successfully oppressing the rest, making sure that no one threatens their power. And depending on your world building, there may be any of a host of reasons why these people got in power. The typical ones being some kind of calamity, a war, a famine, a pandemic, or just some kind of angry conflict that resulted in someone saying, now it's our turn to rule. It could be anything. Maybe junk food place employees are going to get fed up with anything, and then they take over the junk food places, and then they get a taste for power, and suddenly everybody's ruled by Ronald McDonald's evil cousin, or the Burger King's cruel brother. I don't know why I suddenly started to imagine that world. It wasn't a pleasant place. But the point is that the main characters of the story are likely to be in some state of involuntary powerlessness. They have had some level of power stripped from them, either from birth or from some kind of event. Um, they may belong to a class that is specifically targeted, like criminals, or some kind of genetic class system, or somebody who just didn't pass the SATs and be sorted into the have nots, while others are sorted into the work for the haves. Nobody's probably being sorted into the haves because the haves are the ones with power and they like to keep it that way. They don't like to share. Sometimes it's taken to the extreme with the powerful elite actually living in a different place, a floating city or a space station or something like that, while everybody else lives in squalor. But it doesn't have to be that extreme. It can simply be a matter of everyone being, I don't know if enslaved is the right word, but being doomed to an existence of bland mediocrity. No famine, not starving in the streets or dying from diseases, just you got this kind of life that's what that was designed for you and you're not moving. Now be happy or get injured. Um, there is a role playing game called Paranoia, which is probably one of the most original dystopias I have ever seen, which is basically after a war, there is a society built by an artificial intelligence, but that artificial intelligence is so messed up by everyone in charge of it constantly reprogramming it to suit their own whims that it's basically gone crazy, and now it's everyone who's not at the top of this very layered society is forced to be happy. If you're not happy, you're clearly trying to commit treason or something. And the ways that people are kept quote unquote happy are just insane. So that's kind of a twist on it, a dystopian happy place, happiness dystopia. And it can be any of those. It can even bleed into post-apocalyptic or cyberpunk fiction by being affected by a minor apocalypse or being on the outskirts of a major apocalypse, or maybe just being the early days of a cyberpunk world where things aren't as extreme yet, but the whole oppressive society and life having very little value unless it's part of the powerful elite being something that is very real. Now, what's the point of a dystopia? Well, the point of a dystopia can often be seen, sadly, as an easy target. It is very difficult to make someone powerful into a villain without making them cruel. And very often, making cruel, powerful villains can make it seem illogical that they would get away with it. How would the CEO of a multinational business be getting away with being a serial killer or enslaving hundreds or even thousands to do their bidding? How would they get away with such cartoon levels of evil? But if it's a dystopia, that's just a Tuesday. That's just how things work. The powerful are doing hideous things on a regular basis because the world works like that. And nobody in power is going to really fight it because the world works like that. Those in power are the ones who do those things. So you can just see it as an extreme version of the worst that our modern world has to offer. But beyond just the whole easy to write villain, dystopias are very often either an exploration or a refutation. What's it called? Uh, a refute of a bad situation. If you've ever seen the classic movie Die Hard, it's basically that theme but turned into a world. It is an underdog story by design. Everybody who's not the powerful elite is an underdog. And when there is nothing but underdogs, it basically becomes the ultimate underdog story. It basically becomes the ultimate rise against the odds story. And that means that you can have your main characters exposed to a lot of horrible, horrible things on their journey to, well, whatever they're trying to achieve. I was going to say that journey to heroism, but it need not be about being a hero. Yes, I'm still yawning, and I only do it when I do these videos, and I don't know why. Um, Whatever they're fighting for, having it done in a dystopia makes it more plausible, and if the world is designed well, more interesting to see them fight against laughably huge odds that would seem completely out of place in many other genres. It could be something as simple as fighting to be allowed to, or not maybe not even be allowed, but fighting to just succeed at going to another part of a city and living there because you have friends there that were moved there for some reason and you did not get to move with them. Something as simple as moving from one part of a city to another for personal reasons could be a horrible, grueling challenge because rules and regulations are in place to make sure that you only move if you're supposed to move for some reason that's ordained, valid by the powerful elite. And such minor things would not be a challenge in most other genres, barely in any. But a dystopia can make anything a challenge if it's against the powerful elite, to the point where it becomes completely illogical from a modern rational standpoint why this would be any kind of challenge. Why would society want to force someone to needlessly die from a treatable disease in a horrible, perhaps very public way? Well, maybe that's the whole point. Maybe the powerful elite wants people to know that they are weak and that they can die from anything that the powerful elite deems needed or deems justifiable. Just like ancient empires used fear and intimidation to keep people in line, this is just a modern version of that. Force people to die from diseases that the rich and powerful can easily be treated for, and you establish your dominance. And you establish that you're a prick, which, again, as mentioned before, is a very valid reason for someone being in power in a dystopia. Dystopias can have horrible situations that would seem completely out of place in nearly any other genres. And horrible situations are very often the seed from which a story grows. It also helps to paint a picture of the kind of characters and the situations and the places that may be found. Maybe the greatest, most risky kind of heroism is being one of the underground doctors actually trying to cure people from a disease that the powers that be have decided no, you filthy commoners are supposed to die from this disease. Only we powerful few are allowed to survive it. Or maybe it's a matter of technology. There are plenty of real world cases where very basic technology is outlawed because those in power feel that it could threaten their power base. Case in point, fax machines and now the internet, here later on, are crushed or kept under massive surveillance by countries that exist today because those countries are oppressive and they don't want people spreading information too fast. In many cases where we see revolutions happen around the world today, first thing that happens is that the government shuts down the internet because they don't want people organizing through modern technology. Maybe other technologies are kept under the same kind of chokehold in a dystopia so that those in power can stay in power. It could be the internet again, but it could again also be modern medicine, or it could be transport technology. Ironically, there is something to be said for the idea of, I hate doing this because I believe in environmentalism, but in an oppressive government banning um, mass transport or private transport because it uses fossil fuels, and then realizing that, hey, if people can't travel, they get a bit easier to control, and then they don't present any other alternative to fossil fuel transport, and suddenly you have a society where the ability to travel more than a few miles becomes forbidden. Maybe even less than that. Maybe you're only allowed to stay in your little village size part of the world. A bit like the example I used earlier, which is completely by coincidence. Maybe it's just something that's on my mind. I don't know why transport would be. But that's another possibility. Or cultural behaviors. One kind of dystopia that is gaining some traction these days is what can best be called perhaps ultra conservative dystopias, where everybody is expected to fit into a view of society that is not only rooted in 50 to 100 years ago, but is also very black and white and maybe ill informed, possibly idealized. The old nuclear family thing, where there could be a society where, first of all, any LGBTQ would be completely outlawed, but also you're not going to be single. You're going to be part of a family, husband or wife. You're going to have children. You're going to have kids, and you're going to have a stable job that will be assigned to you. And you're going to fit into this model of the world because those in power say so. And any opposition is treason. In a dystopia, someone in power is holding on to power with not just any means possible, but also with massive success, at least usually. At least the system has massive success, even if the people actually serving in positions get swapped out, the system of oppression stays there. And that system has a very clear idea about what you, the person on the street, is allowed to do and is not allowed to do. And they do not care if the consequences for you are unbearable. Dystopias are about being powerless. In fact, dystopias are maybe a realistic version of cosmic horror, in that in cosmic horror there's something that is just bigger than you and it will hurt you, and there's very little you can do about it. Here, the horrors are not supernatural, or likely not supernatural, but they are a miniature version of it. There is very little you can do about it. They are very powerful and they will influence your life, likely for the worst. And if you're going to resist, you're going to have to be a hero about it. Or at least you'll have to be very, very skilled and put your life on the line. Or maybe just something else on the line. Maybe they don't kill you. Maybe you just get stripped of anything. Or maybe you get to travel even less. Maybe your cell phone subscription is permanently shut down. Maybe you don't get to buy any more strawberry milkshakes. I don't know. But you will be punished if you do not fit in to an oppressive regime's vision of society.